All right, guys, I'm here with Walid Abdo again. Going to do part two because we lost a little bit of the last one. If you don't know who he is, go check out the last podcast with him to hear more about him and his story. Long story short, he's a wrestling coach. He's got a extensive background in S&C and nutrition, and in general, he's just a machine. So, Walid, thanks for joining me again, brother.
No, thank you, bro. Keen for part two.
For sure, bro.
Sure.
So I think we'll pick up just where we left off last time, just where the recording cut out. And I
Yeah,
think we
yeah,
were just starting to get into, we talked a little bit about the importance of training partners. And you started to talk about how I guess your game started to elevate when you surrounded yourself with more higher level athletes.
mm.
So yeah, go through that a little bit. And yeah, your advice in around that and your insights about it.
Yeah. I think just trying to remember where we left off in the last potty, but I
I
think
think you were sorry. Yeah, I think you were talking about like how you have started working with the guys from AET as well and SAR and how that level of competition kind of was starting to elevate your
yeah,
game
yeah.
and the pace as well. We
Oh, that's
discussed that a little
pace.
bit. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I guess pace. Nailing your pace and I think we said pace was had a lot to do with how you organize your techniques, your tactics, your finishes, all that sort of stuff in the
Hmm.
positions that you end up in, and how difficult they are is determined by your training partners. Yeah, like I'll just give you an example. I guess today I was wrestling with my coach Ali Abdo in the morning, and there's a position called a high crotch to a
Hmm.
single leg with the head on the outside. And Ali's like next level, right? He's a world class athlete, and he does things because he's been wrestling for so long. He does all these little defensive things that he doesn't pick up on, but I notice because no one else does them. And so I said to Ali, Ali was like, "Oh, I couldn't get to your leg because you were doing, this defensive technique." He goes, "What defensive technique?" And I'm like, "It's just, yeah, you didn't notice it, but because you've been doing it for so long, but that was stopping me from getting to that attack, to that position." Um, and then we were just after that, we had a bit of a discussion around again training partners and how continuing to wrestle in that position, right, with Ali is going to help elevate my level, right? Because now I have to learn to get to that same position, but through a higher level opponent who defends, a different way or at a higher standard. So that's just an example of how your training partners can take you to new heights because they're all gonna do stuff like um, if you don't have partners to put you in the positions that you need to be ready for in competition, then you're not gonna improve. So finding guys who are going to expose you to those positions and challenge you there. If you don't have guys like that, then it's going to be very hard to progress.
Yeah, for sure, bro. A
Yeah.
very interesting insight there, and I mean, it's crazy that Ali's still operating at such a high level. I mean, I think it's been a little while
Oh,
since he's competed, right?
oh yeah, man, he's a machine. He stays fit. It's part of his yeah. It's his lifestyle to stay in shape. So I always say, man, if he jumped into a national competition, man, he'd win. He'd ace it.
Yeah, he's a machine for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
year did he go to? Was it the Olympics? He went to the Olympics in, was it 08?
yeah. His first Olympics was in 2000 in
Yeah,
Sydney. He
yeah,
was 18, so his first Olympics was at 18 years of
crazy.
age. By then, he had done several training camps in the States under Dan Gable at Iowa. Um, so yeah, he was very very good. And then I think he did 2004 in Athens. I think 2004 was in Athens. and then 2008 Beijing, and then I think he missed out on Rio. That was his last attempt.
Wow. I didn't know he
Yeah,
went to three and all those training camps in the US as well. I mean, that's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
the cream of the crop, especially in Australia. So, I mean, it makes
Oh
sense
yeah,
that he's still operating at such a high level. What a amazing athlete.
yeah, yeah. Like he's right, man. Like his baseline level of performance is like our level of what we're trying to get to. Do you know what I mean? So what's easy
Yeah.
for him is the next level for us, which is why it's so difficult. And he's gone all over the world and trained with some of the greatest wrestlers in the sport. So wrestling with him,
Yeah, that's
you get
crazy.
to tap into the skills that he's picked up.
For sure. And yeah, again, that's why it's so important, I guess, to have those high level training partners and just you know people around you to get to that level. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, I mean, definitely for anyone in Melbourne, you got to suss out this sort of this team, this camp for sure. I
mm,
don't think it gets any better. Anyone
mm.
associated with such a high level is
Oh yeah,
gonna
yeah,
you know be be good in coaching and in competing. So I mean, the results speak for themselves, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, bro. Um, so also last time it cut off a little bit when we were talking about S&C. We ended up going into the S&C sort of side of things. So I want to talk about that a little bit more as well. Um, I guess talk to me about, I guess, your main philosophy on the S&C and nutrition side of things when it comes to like combat sports, from wrestling to anything else. You've worked with a lot of athletes. So yeah, talk to me about, like, I guess, just your basic philosophies around that.
Yeah, yeah, with the S&C, I think nowadays, I take more of a needs based approach. So in the past, I used to be very rigid in my approach and say everyone needs to get strong, everyone needs to get explosive, everyone needs to tick all these boxes. Um, but now I look at what the athlete is good at, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and what they're getting from their sport, and then I give them what they're missing because that's going to be the highest return on their investment in me and in the training. And also that helps a lot because it ensures that you're not wasting time and effort into areas that don't need to be improved or things that aren't relevant to the sport. Um, Especially if you're in a competition phase or you've got someone competing regularly, then it's really important to narrow things down to what the athlete needs, yeah, or for my own training as well, what I need, um, and then prioritizing around that, and then yeah.
Yeah, that needs based approach is like something that I think is really important.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, there's a lot of people doing too much and maybe too much of the wrong things as well. But yeah,
mm,
nailing it down into what does this person actually need is, I guess, yeah,
mm.
like the perfect philosophy to, you know, take all your weaknesses and, I guess, turn them into strengths,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
bring them up to the level that your strengths are.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so I guess, how does that look like? Is it like constant, like, testing and getting a baseline and always, like, what's the process like for that to continually improve the areas?
Yeah, obviously there's I think I'll probably use an example like Jake Matthews, for example, or even any athlete. Yeah, there's always an element of tracking. Like I've always taken an objective approach because I want to show, obviously if you're working as a coach, you want to show that your athletes are getting results. You don't want to just sort of depend on them feeling good because when they don't feel good, then they're going to blame the S&C coach, right?
Mm.
So I'll always put like a string of tests throughout the training block, whether that's velocity based training or just numbers on a spreadsheet. maybe a max effort on an assault bike, just something in there to show that there's continuous improvement. And then I guess if the information's available, you could set, like you said, benchmarks and that sort of thing that you can sort of achieve. So going back on Jake Matthews, we had access to the UFC Performance Institute data for their MMA, all the MMA athletes that have ever come through the Performance Institute. So we're talking all the high level MMA guys that have been tested for their strength, their speed, their power, their agility, their reactive ability as well. So all these general qualities had been put into a table, and they had categorized them from, I think, they had all the numbers for the world class guys, and then you had it on a scale of the guys that aren't performing as well, or maybe the beginners, not the beginners, but the guys that might be breaking through, they're on the lower end. Okay, so they're still developing, and then you had the guys who were at the top. They were at the the top end of that scale, and at elite, or can't remember how they categorized it, but they had a category for them. And so with Jake Matthews, my aim was to get him close to that elite level, because that's where he's at, right? So in order to perform at that elite level, he needs to be at least at or near those benchmarks at a minimum. So a lot of my programming was to help bring his qualities, his general qualities, his physical qualities up to those standards, right? And obviously, I think what the standout for me in doing that, I think I did a couple of, I think we did 2 or 3 fights together, but he had a successful run. But the standout was his fight against Andre Fiallo, which I'm quickly checking on Wikipedia now. I think he knocked out Andre Fiallo, right? I don't know if you know too much about Andre Fiallo at the time, but he was
Great
the
fighter.
knockout guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was the knockout guy. Like, he was knocking. I think he had knocked out all of his opponents up until Jake Matthews. So there was a bit of like, there was a bit of uncertainty on how it might go, but that fight ended with Jake Matthews knocking him out, and I think it was the first knockout of Jake Matthews' career, right? Which was massive. And when you talk knockouts, what do most people associate with that with? Raw power, right? So it was a really good reflection on what he did, in the weight room, and how he brought all those qualities back up, which is what we did, right? And I felt that played a massive role in getting that knockout of his career, and it was huge. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that fight against Andre was awesome performance from Jake, and I didn't know you were working with him at that time. So, I mean, yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
that not only the skills but also the whole package with the S&C contributed to that
Mm.
performance. And yeah,
Oh,
probably
absolutely. Yeah.
one of his best performances, and I think maybe his first knockout in the UFC. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but a great performance. I want to unpack a little bit in regards to the data that you've seen, because I mean that's huge. Being able to see all the data from every fighter on the UFC roster. I know it's been a while, but is there anything that you remember that stood out? Like, was there a marked difference from the lower end of the spectrum to like the elite level guys? Like, what was the numbers? The difference in numbers, I guess, and what sort of metrics were they using?
Mm.
And was there a huge difference in like strength and speed and power abilities, or what do you think was the difference? I guess.
There wasn't a massive difference. I guess they there was a lot in that journal. There's a shit ton of metrics that they're recording. Across cardiovascular strength, maximal strength, speed, agility, power. They've got all these different tests. The main ones I was looking at were, I think, reactive power, and I think they use a counter movement jump, and I think a series of drop tests. So they'll drop you from a certain height, and they assess your reactive strength using a force plate, right? And they stick that on the chart. Now, I think when I was working with Jake, he was probably around 3 or 4 levels below that elite level. And Jake had already been super strong in the past. I think his strength was neglected at that stage when I was working with him. So it actually didn't take too long to get him where he needed to be, and it didn't take too much either. Like I would do really low volume work, but a high intensity to get that strength stimulus. Like we'd do single sets, for example. He'd come into the gym, he'd warm up to one set, and he'd leave. And it wouldn't be a max set either. It would be just, he'd probably have about two reps left in the tank. So I did my best to get him strong without taxing his body too much, right? Where I think a lot of people go wrong. And he didn't need to push too crazy because he wasn't super, super strong to the point where, it became very difficult to get gains. And he wasn't so weak or such a beginner where, he had to work harder to get strong. He was just simply getting back to where he used to be a while back. So anyway, I think I went a little bit off track. But I took just those values, the strength testing, the reactive tests, and just work towards achieving them with Jake.
You were explaining what that reactive drop test is and the actual metric that they're measuring.
Yep.
Because like that's pretty interesting to me. Like what they're actually measuring and how to bring it up and why it's important for combat sports or anything like that.
Yeah. Oh, well, the drop jump in particular, that's measuring firstly reactive, your reactive strength, right, or your active speed. So it's how quickly you perform plyometric type actions. So a plyometric is pretty much something that it's so if you think of a jump, it utilizes your nervous system to create an impulse that helps you explode off the ground when you land like hard, for example, a jump or a sprint. And it's more associated with the tendons and the nervous system versus something like strength or power, like a bench press or a pushing action, which utilizes the muscles and also the nervous system as well, but in a different way. And so if you talk about positions that are similar to something like a drop jump or that might transfer into the sport, they're things like quick changes in direction. Could be something like, you might duck or weave or change direction to evade a punch and then counteract with your own attack. So, those quick like slips and then into a jab or a hook, something like that. So, those types of movements that are very short, very quick, and reactive, as opposed to just raw power and strength, like picking someone up and throwing them. Which would be more on the strength side. More of the exercises like max deadlift or bench press or things of that nature.
So it's measuring. Is it measuring like the reaction time, like the amount of time it takes for you to explode off the ground?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and that's an indication of how well developed that body system to be able to do that is, which is
Okay.
your reactive strength or your reactive speed.
Yeah, that's interesting because like you were saying with slipping and stuff like that, but I have this thing that I don't know if I don't think a lot of other coaches or fighters can do it or teach it. A lot of people probably just do it naturally, but I've noticed that like if I go into a punch with a little hop off the ground, like not actually really leaving the ground, but
Yes.
just sort of pumping my ankles, like bang,
Yeah.
and then into a punch. I
Yeah.
noticed that it's much more snappy. So I've taught a
Yeah.
lot of my students that. and it really does take your
Mm.
like snappiness and power to the next level. So that sounds like what you're like talking about with the reactive strength and the plyometric sort of stuff. Like I've literally explained it like it's like hopping off the ground into your punch type
Yes,
of
yeah,
thing.
yep.
Yeah,
And that's it. And that's called a pre-stretch. So,
yeah,
if you think like a locker band, when you stretch a locker band and you
hmm,
release it, then you get more, energy back. So you're a
yeah,
little bit more explosive because you're, converting electrical energy. Sorry, not electrical. You're creating a lot of elastic potential to contribute to your power going forward or
yeah,
whatever. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
So
so
no,
there,
that's true.
sorry, yeah, just continue
Yeah.
with what you,
No, that's it's
yeah.
exactly doing that can help you be more explosive and faster as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And what sort of things should we be doing to train those? Is it like just plyometrics, reactive stuff? Because I kind of wanted to also unpack like all these metrics that you're talking about that you measure your athletes with, people like Jake and all the other UFC fighters that the PI measures certain metrics. What do you think is kind of neglected in a lot of S&C or just general training routines? Because I made a video on Instagram the other day about building the perfect boxing session and
Yep.
including things like hand-eye coordination and reactive drills and things like that,
Mm.
which I think things like that are really neglected. What's your opinion on, I guess, those metrics? Out of all those metrics, what do you think is neglected the most?
Mm.
Um, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, going back on what you said, like some of the things that you can do to build, let's say, let's stick to reactive
Hmm.
strength and speed, is skipping is massive.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
any beginner, like if I'm working with kids or if I've got kids in class, um, and they're pretty new to training, they've got a long way to go in terms of their development physically and in the sport as well. I'll always tell them to start skipping ASAP, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I just tell them, look, add it in before training, do it after training, do it on your days off. If you've got nothing to do, just start skipping. And you'll find that over time, first I'll start with little jumps. I'll actually use one of my clients as an example. I think he might have been he might have been less than 10 when he started with me, or around 10, I think. And his jumping was very slow and sluggish when he was skipping, and he kept missing the skip, so that the rope would bump into his ankles and stuff, would hit his ankles, and he'd have to reset. But I just kept saying, keep going, keep going. And obviously over time, it's just like lifting weights. What do you do once you're able to lift the 5 kg dumbbells? You move to the 10s. And then from the 10s, you move to the 12s and then the 15s and so on. You just keep adding resistance. Well, in this sense, with skipping, little skips, if we think of like little skips, just jumping over the rope, not doing high knees, not doing double unders or anything like that, it sounds very rudimentary and basic, right? But for a beginner, that's actually a very intense stimulus for them, right? So just by doing that consistently, they're going to build that elasticity and the nervous system up over time. And then once they're really good at that, then they can move to um, like high knees, or single leg jumps with the skipping, and then they can gradually build up to something like double unders, because that's really hard too. And that's one way to intensify reactive speed or strength, by increasing the height of the jump. So when someone's really good at doing like little jumps, then you get them to do bigger jumps. And then when they're good at bigger jumps, you get them to do single leg jumps. Single leg jumps are a lot harder to do than bilateral jumps. So yeah, unilateral is harder than bilateral. So you can incorporate unilateral jumping to essentially add resistance, right, or progress elastic strength, reactive speed. They all mean the same thing. Um, over time, right? And then when you've got someone super experienced, or as they get better over time, then you can introduce the hurdles, right? Continuous hurdles. And then what do you do with the hurdles? You just make them higher. And then you have all other variations, like instead of hurdles, you could use boxes, jumping on and off the box, and then over time increasing the height of the box. Okay. Now, obviously, the higher the box, the harder it is to control your weight. So there is a point where, you obviously won't develop any further. But yeah, a good coach will understand where those limits are and program them correctly and build people up to where they need to be. A good coach understands those boundaries really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the being able to just implement that through skipping as well. It's something that's very manageable for most people, especially people who might just be starting, or they're at that intermediate sort of level.
Yeah.
Is it just about skipping? Like, obviously, if you're a complete beginner, you've never skipped and trained anything before in your life, anything's better than nothing. But once
Yes.
you sort of start to get like maybe someone who's had a couple of fights and they're just, you know, still in the beginning of their journey and they might not have it down pat 100%, is it not just about skipping? Is it about the way that you're skipping too? Like having a little bit of a conscious effort to make those skips a little bit more plyometric or explosive, I guess. Is that Can that
Mm.
make a big difference as well? Because I
No, no.
find, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can tell them, we can give them like really specific cues, like if we're focusing on rhythm, right? Like if I'm teaching a new style of jump, whether it be skipping or we call them like low intensity plyos, which are just small jumps. So think about like split space. If I haven't got a rope, then I'll do these sorts of jumps instead. I'll do like split stance jumps, crisscross, forward and back, left and right, inner circle, just all different little variations, right? But they're all low intensity plyos. You're not jumping high; they're all just little bounces. Um, and when I'm teaching those at the beginner phase, or if it's new to the athlete, we'll focus just on rhythm and slowness. We're not trying to get a pop or speed. We don't care
Hmm.
about that. We're getting rhythm first and technique. So we'll just say, look, just play around. I'll say things like, just play around, just get used to it. Don't stress too much about going quick. Just get the rhythm going, and then they'll just start working through that program. So there might be 10 variations of little jumps that I'll give them on a list, and I'll just make them work through it and just be rhythmic about it. And I'll implement it as part of the warm up. Then maybe over 3-4 weeks, if I see them completing all those 10 jumps with really good rhythm and it's consistent, then I'll switch up the cue. And the coaching cue will be, okay, I want you to do that with more pop. I want you to go a little bit higher or sharper or faster. I'll give them all those little, cues depending on what I want them to focus on.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy because like I feel like those sorts of uh, those sorts of plyometrics are the perfect part of a warm up for combat sports.
Yeah.
I even put it in my video on the perfect boxing session because a lot of the Eastern Bloc boxers and stuff like that will do
Yeah.
things like exactly like how you're describing, like crisscross jumps. They use the like a ladder or a like tape drawn on the floor with like squares or whatever, and they
Yeah.
they sort
Yeah.
of bounce through that in different patterns. And
Yes.
yeah, not only is that making your tendons more reactive, I guess, but it's also
Yeah.
building that coordination and that rhythm that you're talking about. So yeah, I
Yeah.
also think that's something that anyone listening can implement right now if they're not implementing it um, in their training yet. But I think
Yeah.
that's a massive thing in terms of like warm up and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Huge. And I think I just remembered what it's called. You're developing your stretch reflex.
Yeah,
Right. So that's what
yeah,
it's called. So you're developing your stretch reflex through those plyometrics, and yeah,
yeah. It's
yeah.
such an interesting topic, man. But
And I
yeah,
love my favorite is skipping. Like,
mm-hmm,
just because the reason why I love skipping so much, even on my website, the videos that you get when it pops up is a guy skipping, because it's just such a well known exercise and it's
mm-hmm,
fundamental and people love it.
mm-hmm,
Like you tell, like I love giving it to kids because kids enjoy it and they try
mm-hmm,
to figure things out and they jump on TikTok and they start looking for different things to do. People see Mike Tyson do it, so it's a bit of a cultish thing to do as well.
Mm-hmm.
people gravitate towards it. So it's so much easier to program skipping than it is to program a random set of jumps just because I think that's what everyone should do, right? Because
Yeah.
they'll probably get bored. So
Yeah.
me personally, I actually bought the kids I trained at a bunch of kids that I was training. I bought them a skipping rope, and I got them really nice ones. I got their favorite color, and I
Mm-hmm.
said, take these ropes, just skip. I didn't give them a
Mm-hmm.
program. I just said, just skip 2 to 3 times a week. Jump on TikTok, fuck around, find something that is fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
And man, they came back, a few months later, and these kids were skipping like fucking Mike Tyson. These kids were keen as,
Yeah.
But when I gave them
Yeah.
the rope, they weren't skipping like that. They were all goofy and
Yeah.
uncoordinated, right? So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, especially for kids, I think something like that, like gamifying,
yeah,
gamifying,
terrifying. That's right.
you know,
Yeah,
that sort of thing can work wonders. But
mm,
yeah, I really love everything you just said because it's
yeah,
very implementable for anyone who's listening and very easy to understand
yeah.
as well. So
I,
that's
I
awesome.
personally do a lot of the stuff you mentioned,
Hmm.
like in the warm ups, the
Hmm.
freestanding jumps without a rope.
Hmm. Yeah,
I'll always do that at the start of a wrestling session just to
yeah,
get up, right, and just to help build the guys up as well. Like it's always like a series of jumps, crisscrosses, split stance jumps, forward and back, like in a boxing stance, left and right. So yeah,
yeah. And those sorts of things, like they prime your nervous system. That like
yeah,
I've felt that they really prepare you for what you're going to do. So yeah,
exactly.
yeah, awesome. And I don't see it enough in gyms. Honestly, I don't see it enough
No,
in
no,
programs, stuff like that. You know that people gyms might do skipping and stuff like that, but it's they don't really even know why they're telling people to skip. It's usually just like, oh yeah, 3 4 rounds skip, and then I don't have
yeah,
to do any coaching.
yeah. Mike Tyson did it,
Yeah,
so I'll do what my
yeah,
coach told me to do it. They don't really
yeah,
know why they're doing it. And
exactly. I think understanding, yeah, like why you're doing it, just for the listeners and also for any coaches, is like paramount because then you can, coach it and program it in a better way.
yeah, yeah, and it helps
Yeah.
the athletes too, man. They'll
Mm.
commit. Like me personally, I'm a person that like wants to know why they're doing anything, right? And
Yeah.
it just helps me commit to it more rather than just being told to do something. And if I'm just told to do something, I won't fucking sleep that night, bro. I'll go and find out why am I doing this,
Yeah.
right?
100%.
And once I find out, then I'm like, oh fuck, I really want that. I actually want to get better at that. Now I'm going to go to the gym twice a day to practice that, as opposed to one. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
You get
Yeah.
way more committed.
100%. And I think that's part of good coaching, right? Is being able to explain why you're doing something or why you're making your students do it. Like, if you can explain the why, then you're obviously qualified enough to like understand those, sorts of things and be able to teach them.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
lot
for
of
sure.
people don't even know why. It's because, oh, my coach done this and then his coach
Yeah,
done that, and they're like, that's kind of like how it goes down. But they've never really taken the time to understand why.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's important.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
bro. So is there any other sort of things? Oh, sorry. With the question back before,
mm,
um, I want to talk about what, like, in terms of the data that you looked at from the UFCPI, what they're measuring. Is there
mhm,
any aspect with taking that data into consideration and just in general, based on what you've seen, what aspect do you think people might be neglecting the most?
mm.
Um, is it
Um,
just everything, or is there something specific that you notice that people neglect too much?
I think I think they're neglecting the basics, if anything. And I think, look, I've been guilty of it myself in the past too. Is there's so much information on the internet now. Like it's information overload. You got so many different influencers, so many different methods, and philosophies and stuff. It's very easy to get distracted. But as long as you're doing some form of jumping, because if you look into this journal, it's so basic. Like the tests that they're using just a jump, right?
Mhm.
You're just doing one jump. You're doing, a heavy bench press, a heavy deadlift, maybe a landmine throw. They do that for upper body reactive power. So they're very simple tests, right? And to build that up, it's a simple program. It really is. And I would say that people would need to go back to the basics and just like even like we were talking about in the last potty, just learn to do them really well, right?
Mm.
And don't change much. And working at the VIS, one thing I really disagreed with their philosophies was every block that the program would change dramatically, right? Like you could go from doing squats, bench, some form of variation to a whole new set of variations the next 4 weeks, right? So you're always going through this period of relearning, and then like the first 2 weeks of a 4 week block might be spent learning and getting familiar with the exercises, and then the next 2 weeks you probably get some benefit, but then by the time you get into the groove, it's a whole new set of exercises again. So it's
Mm.
kind of like wrestling. If you're constantly changing techniques and focusing on 50 different things, you're not going to get good at anything. And the whole purpose of keeping a program basic and consistent is to just get better at one thing and build skill over time, because skill acquisition takes time. And if you're
Mm.
only spending short periods of time, then a lot of your strength gains come from skill acquisition. And if you're spending such short times on certain exercises, you're not going to spend enough time to get good and get the full benefits from it. So, before going to the VIS, I myself and I have other coaches who, high level coaches that follow the same philosophy, will follow the same program for months on end. Like it won't change, right? There might be some variations to the accessory work, but the main lifts will stay pretty much the same if we're following a strength program. And, and that's because skill acquisition and familiarity and stuff is important. But the reason why a lot of coaches are varying things quite often is to keep people interested,
Mm.
and also to keep people paying them for a service,
Yeah.
right? Because no one wants, well, this is the way most people think. People don't like monotony. They don't like the basics. People get bored quick. They like the new exercise of the month and all that sort of shit. And I think social media has played a massive role in that.
Mm.
And the problem is if you get a coach like me, or a coach, an old, I wouldn't say old school, but someone who follows a traditional philosophy of sticking to the basics, people get bored, right? And not a lot of people have the mental fortitude to do one thing for a long time, right? Um, so that's why changing things up keeps us in a job. It doesn't give people the exact results we want. It gives them some, but it keeps us in a job, keeps us getting paid, and that's one of the dirty secrets of S&C, right? We do things that are unnecessary and won't create results, but it creates retention, right? And keeps people interested. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, bro, you've hit the nail on the head.
yeah,
With what? Because I was getting like when you said that, some of the things you disagreed with were about changing the programs every month or whatever.
mm,
I wanted to ask you that specific question, like why do you think they're doing that? Why do you think some coaches are doing that? And is it because they're just trying to keep it interesting for their clients? And so, I mean, you've answered my question before I've asked it, but it's 100% true. And
mm,
even the same thing with any like boxing or any other martial arts, I guess, that I've trained. Um, you know, the best gym that I've trained at in terms of boxing was where we done almost the exact same thing every single day, you know?
yeah, yeah,
And it wasn't the most fun I've had in my training, not
mm,
even close, you know?
yeah, 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 yeah,
That's why I always say that like the boring work is the thing that gets you better, and
mm.
getting better, um, it can be boring at times, you
Oh, it
know?
is, yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, but I think people have to understand that when you're hiring a coach, you're not just hiring someone to write you a new program every couple of
mm,
days or couple of weeks. You're hiring someone to keep you accountable and to
mm.
track those metrics and to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And so a lot of people can't hack that. So
Yeah.
like you said, in order to keep the lights on, people have to, coaches might have to do things that, aren't the best way.
Yeah. And
So
there's a lot of creative ways. Like instead of, this is where I sort of made mistakes earlier. I used to say, "Oh well, that's the way I do things, so fuck off," right? And then I'd lose money, right? But
yeah,
then I was like, "Fuck, I can't keep doing this, bro. I got rent to pay.
yeah, I
I
can relate to that.
can't just keep giving up." So
Yeah.
what I started doing was, I knew that there was only one or two exercises person A needed to do to get better. So
Mm,
I'd put those two main exercises, right?
mm,
And they would stay the same for 16 weeks. But then
mm,
I would fill the rest of the program with bullshit, right? Like seriously, it would be 8
yeah,
exercises of just
yeah,
shit, right? But I
yeah.
didn't care, because all I cared about, if I could get them into the gym to do the
Mm,
two most basic exercises that are going to get them the most progress. So a jumping exercise and a pressing exercise or something, that would stay the same. But then the
mm,
accessories would change, so it'd give them that it'd break up the monotony,
yeah.
right? It'd keep things a bit interesting. So it might be the accessory work, the sort of the bodybuilding stuff, the
Mm,
mobility orientated exercises. I would change that up, because that's okay
mm,
to change.
mm-hmm,
If anything, it's good to change them, because you're getting different angles, and it keeps you flexible and mobile and shit.
mm,
But the first two exercises would stay the same for maybe 16, 12. I'd stretch it out.
yeah.
And I found that approach just kept me in business for a bit longer.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I
Mm,
think, it might sound it it might not sound the best when people hear that, but at the end of the day, it's because you've
mm,
also got their best interests at heart. If
that's
they
right.
weren't working with you, then they probably wouldn't be doing those two exercises consistently.
Mm,
So you changing up their program, but keeping those exercises is doing your best work for them as well. You know.
correct. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
But yeah, like you said, with the overload of information and social media and whatever, I seen this quote. I think it was from like a game developer or something a long time ago, and it kind of stuck with me because I've also been the kind of guy to try and optimize everything, optimize. It's a big buzzword in the fitness or in the sports space, and to a degree, optimization is important, I think. But the quote is, people will or players will optimize the fun out of any game, given the opportunity to something
Mm,
like that. So, like as humans, we in general tend to optimize the fun out of a lot of things.
yeah, yeah, that's
That's
right.
why I think it's also important to keep it basic and just sometimes keep it fun as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something that I thought might be to do with that. So but
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. And I think fun is so underrated. And I
mm,
don't think, I think the coaches, probably the more ignorant coaches, they, the less informed coaches, they probably think they associate fun with laziness or neglect or whatever. But fun is such a key component of program, and even training and retention. Like
mm,
the number one reason for burnout is people lose love for the sport. They're not enjoying it anymore. The culture is toxic or something, right? But if you can build fun into a program, if you can make someone fall in love with a sport or a training program or anything, they're going to stick to it for a lifetime. And if you ask all the fighters and anyone in any sport that has been in it for 20, 30 years, if you ask them why they keep doing it, they'll tell you it's because I love it,
mm,
right? I enjoy it. It's not hard for me because I love doing this. I love training. I love pushing myself. It's never like, oh, I fucking hate it. I have to put my head down, bite down on my mouth guard and grind through every single session because I fucking hate it, right? I
yeah,
hate training, you know. There might be some people that are like that, but of the athletes I've come across who are like that, they don't last as long as the guys who love it,
yeah,
right? And have found a sustainable mindset to see them through an entire career, and and even longer.
For sure. And I think that's like the key is to be able to balance the boring things that are like 100% necessary to get better at your sport
Yeah,
and do them consistently whilst also having fun in your session, which can be a hard balance, like a lot of the
yeah,
time, a coach might land on either side of the spectrum.
yeah.
Um, so like what I try and do is like we do all our necessary work at the end, implementing sparring games, before like any conditioning or something.
Mm.
Sparring games, not only are those sparring games fun, but they're also very good to make you better.
That's right. Yeah,
So things like that, people can like look forward to that at the end of the session, whatever. We can, play a touch spar or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, I think finding that balance between, doing the boring necessary work and also having some fun while still not making it while still making it something that's going to make you better at your skill.
yeah.
I think to me that's like the balance that I've kind of worked out.
Yeah,
In that's
yeah,
my opinion on the training side of things.
yeah. And you'll find you won't find any sport that harps on about grind more than wrestling. And
Yeah,
it's so what's the word for it, man? It's a
like a bit toxic.
not toxic.
Yeah,
I don't know. Is it cringe? I don't know if cringe is the right word,
yeah,
but not cringe. But it's just overused. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like yeah, it's a grind. Like wrestling is a high intensity sport, but I don't think people respect how much skill is involved as well. Like a lot of the wrestlers aren't going in there and killing themselves. They're going in there with specific goals, techniques, tactics to execute and get better. They're not just like I said earlier, just biting down on their mouth guard and just going crazy, and just hyping
Mm,
themselves up and thinking, "Fuck, I got to really, grind myself. I have to battle through this session like it's the hardest thing in my life, and my heart's on my sleeve, and I have to, wrestle till I die tonight." That's not a sustainable mindset.
mm,
Um, a lot of the high level wrestlers talk a lot about that as well in their own podcasts. You have to search for the enjoyment, the pursuit of technique, the pursuit of improving, focusing on improvement, you know. And then obviously you have your outliers, guys that actually need that mindset. They need that sort of heart on the sleeve mentality.
mm.
You have your few wrestlers that are like that, but for the majority, it's yeah that sort of mindset doesn't last very long.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like a lot of people getting into certain sports, whether it be wrestling, boxing, kickboxing, MMA, whatever it is, like they might see one of their favorite athletes talk about like how hard they work and how important that grinding and killing yourself in the gym is, and then they try and adopt that mentality, you
Yeah,
know, which
yeah,
is like good to a degree, but at the end of the day, you're not this person, so you also have to think about what works better for you, not just what works for this certain person. This person's style might be, they might enjoy killing themselves and you don't. So don't force yourself to do, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
kill yourself too much unnecessarily if that's not how you enjoy your training, if that's not what makes you show up every day.
yeah. That's right. And like you know, just like you said, everyone's an individual. I mean, you've got guys when you're watching at the Olympics or the World Championships, seeing the wrestlers warm up backstage. You've got some wrestlers who are wearing headphones, music blasting, and they're getting hyped up. Then you've got like Sajalayev. He's very
Mm,
popular, right? Sajalayev.
mm,
He's not doing that. He's sitting down. He's reading the Quran, right?
mm,
He's reading pages from the Quran and staying relaxed. So
mm,
everyone has their own rituals and mindsets. Well, actually, when I studied sports psychology as part of my sports science degree, they called it a POMS, and it's called
mm,
it stands for Profile of Mood States,
mm,
and it's a scale of all the different emotions and moods that help us tune into the state of mind that we need to be in to give us our best performance. And it'll have things like anger, relaxation, calmness, nervousness, all these different emotions, right? And you tap into that And to be able to tap into that takes a lot of practice. But, and that takes, doing a lot of competition and all that sort of thing. But once you figure that out, you create a ritual to tune into that, and then that'll create your best performance,
Yeah,
or
wow.
not your best performance, but consistent performance,
Yeah.
right? And that ties back into the training partner stuff as well. It's what I wanted to mention in the training partner stuff is having training partners to practice, or elite training partners who are going to compete like your competition is massive for your mental toughness training as well, right? Because self-doubt is massive in competition, and when negative thoughts start to pop up in your head, the only thing that you have to fall back on to make you feel confident is the training partners you had and what you developed in training. So, for example, if you're going to go up against a judoka in competition, like that could be a nerve trigger, a nervous trigger, or an anxiety trigger, and you think, oh fuck, man, I've got a high level judo guy coming up in my second bout. Fuck. The positive thought that replaces that negative thought is, for example, training with a judoka, right? So if I trained with a judoka, then I'm going to be like, oh wait, hold on, I know exactly how to wrestle a guy, a judoka. Keep my hips low, clear the underhooks, stay out of range, all those sorts of things, right? I understand that a judoka has a high stance, so I know I'm prepared to wrestle a judoka, right?
Yeah.
Then you relax. You're like, oh, no, I'm prepared. I can do that, right? So, like I went off track. What was I talking about?
About the mindset and the POMS thing as
Yeah,
well.
that's
You
right.
were mentioning, yeah.
So now that's the training aspect, but going back to the mood state aspect, you have to train that in training as much as you do everything else.
Yeah.
So I mentioned in the last potty where it cut off, if you're afraid of, or not afraid, but nervous about training or wrestling live with someone you've never wrestled before, you should seek out any opportunity to wrestle someone you've never wrestled before and run yourself through your thoughts. What am I thinking? What are my strategies? What are my tactics? How do I wrestle someone new? And you should know exactly what to tap into when you are facing a new opponent. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's mentally, and that's also, tactically, technically, your game plan for wrestling new people that you've never wrestled before. And so that's trained over time.
Yeah. Bro, like everything you just said is I feel like I've learned a lot just from that, and I want to start unpacking those topics that we just mentioned.
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, yeah, what you just said with the preparing your mindset in training with different training partners, etc. I feel like that's something that I never really thought about too much. I mean, it's a little bit hard, I guess. With striking, because you kind of don't want to knock out your training partners, like,
Yeah.
so
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's a little bit different. But yeah,
Yeah.
like I've just with you saying that, I've noticed that in my head when I go to spar, I just tell myself, oh man, it's just a spar. Like, I'm not fighting for a world title here. I don't need to. I kind of getting lazy, not just with mindset, but then that influences your performance or whatever. So what you said with preparing your mindset, how you're going to compete in your training, that really to me seems super important, and that's something I'm going to definitely start implementing a bit more.
Yeah.
And even like with what you said in the POMS and preparing all of those things, that to me is also really interesting because in my past 4 fights, each time I've been trying to discover like what mindset gets me my best performance. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, do I
Yes.
have to be super calm, or do
Yeah.
I have to get angry? Do
Yeah.
I have to be scared and anxious, and maybe that's what's going to make me perform? And I've heard different fighters say that, yes, I'm scared. Or then you see guys like Hamza who look like they just want to kill someone when they go in there. There's
Yeah.
so many different things. Um,
Yep.
and like I've been trying to figure out what gives me my best performance, um, like my last fight, I kind of tried to do the confidence thing, and I don't think that gave me my best performance. And then the one before that, I got angry, and then like that didn't give me my best performance either. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
so like I've been trying to figure out what that is for me. Um,
Yes.
so that's really interesting that you've mentioned that, and I want to expand on that a little bit more. Like, have you found what makes you work best, and what are some things we can do to try and tap into that mindset that gives us our best performance?
Yeah. Yeah. I learned a lot of that through my sports science degree, my experience at the VIS, and then there's a couple of guys in the industry that are incredible. They've worked with some of the best athletes in the world, and one book that taught me a lot and actually shaped my entire approach it's called Do Hard Things. So
Mm-hmm.
it's called Do Hard Things by, I'll just get the name of him. I think it's because he has an Instagram and he puts up amazing stuff. His name is Steve Magnus,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about. So on the front cover it says why we get resilience wrong and the surprising science of real mental toughness.
Mm.
Right, and I'm like, fuck, man, that's unreal. And to in a nutshell, it's essentially saying that mental toughness, it's not some fake thing where we just sort of g ourselves up and try to convince ourselves that we're good. It's
Mm.
built upon our all the work that we do, all the
Mm.
our training, our methods, our periodization, our approach, our culture, everything. It's all of that. That's what builds our mental toughness. Um, and then putting ourselves in those positions, improving, and then executing those skills and succeeding. That's what creates confidence over time. Um, and so going back to um, the training partner one, you have to be so honest with yourself, man. Like,
Mm.
if you're training with, then this is how you form real mental toughness. It's one of the things in the book. It gives you like a bit of a blueprint on how to do this. You have to sit down with yourself and actually be honest with how your training is looking, and you have to admit to yourself, you know, am I training with people who are actually challenging me the way I will be challenged in competition, right? And if that answer is no, then you have to change something. Otherwise, if you get to competition and you get beat, you get your ass kicked, there's your answer, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you have to go back and reassess. So um, that's your only way to sort of building that toughness, and then um, and same thing goes with building the mental state. If you're always kicking ass in the gym because you're training with beginners, you're going to build such a massive false sense of confidence,
Mm.
because again, you're not honest with yourself. You're not actually being realistic of what's in front of you. So you end up building that. You fall into that trap of building a false sense of confidence, and then when you get beat in competition, you're shocked.
Mm.
So that's why we have to go back and always be honest about what we're doing. You know, um, and I find a lot of guys fall into into that trap that they're probably unaware or they're just in denial. And so when they get beaten comp, they're just shocked. They might say, "Oh, it was just a bad day. Oh, my nutrition was off. Oh, I fucked up my weight cut. Oh, my ankle was sore." You know, they'll never actually identify that it's actually the training that's causing these problems. You know, so
Bro, I can relate to
yeah,
that what you're saying exactly, because I feel like I've been going through this same process, whereas now I'm starting to gain clarity around like where I messed up in my preparations,
yeah,
like my last performance, got my ass kicked.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
I tried to learn a lot from that, and yeah, I realized, like with what you're saying with the training partners, the guy I fought, he was like 6'5", 4 or 5 inches height on me, much bigger, and I hadn't sparred with any guys that size. You know, there's no
Yeah.
guys in the gym at that size.
Yeah.
So like I wasn't prepared to face someone that size, but in my head, like obviously you have no choice when it's time to fight, it's time to fight, and you got to create some confidence, you know?
Yeah. 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 That's right.
So yeah, I tried to just get through it and say, yeah, nah, I'm going to be sweet, you know, whatever. But that preparation was off, and that's not an excuse for, you know, performing badly. It's just
Yeah.
the reality is that you have to, like with what you're saying, you have to prove to yourself that you can
Yes.
tough it out in those situations,
Yeah.
and that you can succeed in those situations. So yeah, like a major shift that I've made now is that, you know, my next camp, I will, you know, seek out those difficult training partners, and, you know, really make sure that that I've prepared myself for those situations.
Yeah. 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 And it was awesome because like I think I can't remember if it got cut out in the previous pod, but it goes back to that mantra that I picked up at the VIS: train the way you want to compete.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way you compete shouldn't be any different to the way you train, right? Like this is a mistake I made early on in early on when I was competing. Is that and I see it now with some of the guys we're working with. They train one way and they compete a totally different way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's training might be a certain way, and then when they get to comp day, they go nuts. They take pre-workout, they listen to music, or they do something completely different. They eat something a lot different to their usual routine. They might get sick or something, um, and they perform a very different way, right? Um, so you should always practice the way you want to compete in training and constantly put yourself in those scenarios if you're training to compete, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all doing. We're training to compete. So you should always be focusing on that, so that when you get to competition, nothing changes. Because
Mm-hmm.
that's the only evidence you have that you're performing well. If the program's perfect, you've got the training partners, everything's not perfect, but you've got things in place that are preparing you properly. Then when you get to comp day, nothing should change. You should do everything you should be doing that you're doing in training, in the competition, right? And that book that I mentioned earlier, when they talk about high level athletes, like the greatest in the world, that are able to rack up like, undefeated records and stuff like that, is that they don't go to competition and, perform at their best every single fight, because that's almost impossible. You're not going to always feel amazing in every fight. You're not going to always perform at your best. But on an average, their baseline level of performance is so high that they're
Mm-hmm.
just that good,
Yeah,
right? And just rehearsed everything, and they're just at a level that exceeds, anyone else, right?
yeah,
So that's how they're able to how they're able to put out really consistent performances, stack up really consistent performances every time they compete. It's because they've essentially, or in the book they call it raising the floor, raising the baseline,
yeah.
right? So you're not always trying to shoot for your best possible performance, but
Mm-hmm.
at a minimum, you're trying to hit that baseline, which is, and that baseline is elite, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I mean, talking about that baseline of performance, it's like, well, even if someone does have an off day, they're
yeah,
still going to be able to perform and win competitions
yeah,
because of that consistency that they've been working on. And something that I've always said is like, you're only as good as your worst day.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
so yeah, I mean, obviously that puts a lot of pressure on you, but at the end of the day, it's the truth, you know.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, I mean, as well with the training the way you want to compete. Last time when you said that, it really resonated with me.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I mean, all of those insights are for sure. Even with the routine as well, like how important is a routine for comp? And do you think the routine that you do in your training sessions and then the routine you're doing comp, if you keep that the same, do you think that has a increase in performance or keeps you at that sort of baseline level?
Yeah, yeah. I like what you just said
Yeah.
before was also an amazing point you
Yeah.
made. Is
Yeah.
that even on the days where you feel shit,
Hmm.
that's the perfect opportunity to practice performing when you feel like shit.
Yeah.
Right?
Hmm.
If you constantly avoid training when you feel like shit, you just don't rock up, then you've never actually practiced how to perform when you feel crap, right?
Mm.
So you're never going to get better. You just when it comes to a day where you have to compete on a day where you don't feel good, you're most likely going to lose, right? Because you haven't practiced it. So whereas if you compete on a day when you train yourself to perform on a shit day, um, then you'll have the confidence that, hey,
Hmm.
okay, no, I've felt like this way before, but I know exactly how to wrestle and get the win. I'm just going to
Hmm.
adjust my tactics a little bit, and I know I'm going to get the win.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, and going back to the routine, yeah, same thing. Like
Hmm.
keeping your routine. I'm a massive believer in year-round training, like never
Hmm.
stop training. Just adjust how often and how intense you're going, and the exercises that you're doing, and
Yeah.
the emphasis. Um, and funny, I was thinking about this today, man. Like a lot of guys who come in hard and fast, like they just go nuts. Like what you mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
they pick their favorite fighter, they listen to a potty, and they say, balls to the wall, fucking head down, bite down on your mouth guard, and just grind the fuck out of yourself 7 days a week. That's physically impossible, bro. You can't
Mm.
do that 7 days a week for the rest of your life,
Mm.
right? At some point, even the best in the world are doing this, but they don't tell you that because that's not clout. It doesn't
Mm.
get views on Instagram, right? Um, but they're making variations in their training as well. When they're off season, they may be training a little bit less. Maybe they're focusing on more lifting and doing a bit less live wrestling or live grappling or live boxing, right? So it's always changing. They may still be training 5 days a week, but the intensity and the volume and the emphasis is changing all the time. So that's on myself. That's what I apply. Like I train year round, but I just adjust the emphasis. And I think a lot of guys don't know how to do that. They feel like they're always pressured to train at a very high level, 7 days a week, uh, you know, all year, um, and nothing else. So if they can't put out that output, then they don't train at all, right? And that's a big mistake that heaps of guys make.
Mm.
And you've probably seen it, bro. You've seen guys come in, they'll go balls to the wall for 3 months. They're amazing, but
Mm.
then they disappear for 3 months,
Mm.
6 months. Yeah, and you're just like, fuck, what happened to that guy? He's a machine, but he's disappeared. You know what I mean? Or they'll come to training 1 week and then they won't come to training for 2 weeks, right? And I think it's because people don't understand how to train by adjusting those variables, right?
Yeah.
If you tell them, oh hey bro, I train. If you say to them, oh I train year round, they're going to be like, what the fuck, bro? You're crazy.
Mm.
You're a machine. But you haven't told them that you adjust those variables yet. Yeah. So that and some people don't understand that.
Yeah. I think like with what you're saying, and something that I've only recently started to realize, in the past couple of years, is
Hmm.
that like consistency trumps everything.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
like
absolutely.
no matter what, if you're showing up consistently, you're generally gonna be better than someone who, like you're saying, is maybe you're training 3 days a week for the whole year,
Yeah.
or you're training 1 hour 5 days a week for the whole year.
Hmm.
But if someone's, doing 6 days a week and then they're only doing it 3 to 6 months a year, at the end of the year, you've done more reps,
Yeah,
you've done more. So yeah, I think it's important to, for athletes to understand that consistency trumps all.
yeah,
Um
yeah,
in and being able to um, you know, periodize your training, like with what you're saying, and adjusting the intensities. But again, like that is a skill, and
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think, with your background in S&C, it's easier to manage those things, like
Mm.
kind of understanding when you're tired, when you can push. A
Mm.
lot of people don't have that awareness,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and they don't have to, but you know, I hope you put a lot of like trust and responsibility in your coach to know those
Mhm.
things.
Yeah.
And if they don't, I mean, bro, that's sport. Like that's why some guys aren't the best. It's because of their environment and their coach and their surroundings. Like it's a it's
100%.
a it's a global thing. It's a global it's a global process. If people aren't doing the right things, then that's the reason why. That's probably the reason why you're not great.
Mhm.
Um, and you can be aware of that, or or you may not be aware of that. And if you're not aware of it, then your career will tell the story. So it's kind of sad for a lot of guys because there's probably a lot of guys out there who have got amazing potential, but they
Mm.
just don't have the resources and the network and the people around them to get them there. And
Oh,
we
for sure.
there's been heaps of guys like that have probably come and gone that could have been the greatest, and we hear about them all the time. But for some reason, their environment hasn't allowed them to flourish.
Oh, for sure, bro. And like something I've always said is like, young guys might come in the gym and they say, yeah, like, I'm going to be UFC world champ, or I'm going to be this world champ. And I'm like, well, who's paying for all this? Because it comes a time when, you get a missus,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
happens,
yeah.
your missus gets pregnant. Now you got to work full time and you can't train anymore. And then when are you going to become UFC champ? You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Yeah.
So, like, people have to have support, whether it's in the form of sponsors or whether it's in the form of family, like support. If you want to succeed, like, support, you don't just have to be good, you have to have a support network and be able
Oh,
to actually train full time, and that's the difference. There's probably some random kid in a village in Russia that'll
yeah,
that'll beat Khabib and Hamza and everything, but no
yeah,
one knows about him because he doesn't have that network.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, there's some sick people out there too, bro. There's people that will
Yeah,
shut those people down, man. And they'll
yeah,
what are they? What's it called, bro? I learned a new word last month. Ostracize.
yeah,
You heard of that?
yeah, yeah,
Ostracize.
yeah.
They used to do this thing back in the day, back in the
Mm,
medieval times.
mm,
They used to ostracize people, right?
mm.
And what it means is if you were good, like if you were just like a bit smarter than everyone, or you had a bit of aura or
Yeah,
charisma, the village could vote to fuck you off. They could vote to
yeah,
expel you for 10 years,
that's crazy.
right? Yeah, so they all vote and they say you're
Yeah,
banished from our village because you're too
yeah,
good and we don't
uh-huh,
like you. So
yeah.
see you later. And they weren't allowed to come back for 10 years. So
That's
but
crazy.
that happens now. That happens
Yeah,
now, but people do it in it happens in modern times. But there's you've probably had people that have tried to exile you as well because of
yeah,
just personal vendetta or just who knows. Yeah, you're
yeah. It
probably a
kind of comes
different
back.
race, yeah,
Yeah,
different ethnicity. You don't fit their mold or whatever.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
it's
for
a sad
sure.
story. Yeah,
But yeah, support is 100% very important for any athlete. So, any young athletes, if you actually want to be a champ, I think the most important advice that I give people is try and get some support. If your family's paying for you, like, or if you got sponsors, that's like, I think, the most important factor to actually succeed at a high level. Unless you're a
oh,
real world beater and just a natural, like, talent and everything, like, you have to have that, and any champ that you've seen throughout history usually has some level of support.
yeah, yeah, and it sucks too because like certain groups will get more support than others,
Yeah,
especially in
exactly.
wrestling, for example. A lot of support is invested into the kids, right?
Mm,
Because they believe if you invest in children, then they have the greatest chance of success because they have the greatest period of time to improve. So that means that they're going to all become Olympic champions. But that's
mm,
all a lie. You cannot predict whether or not a kid is actually going to see through that entire process, right? You might
mm,
have maybe 1%, maybe 1 out of 50 kids might actually go through the entire process, right? And so the problem with that is, is that you miss out on the other age groups that can also achieve success, because success can be achieved at all levels, at all stages. But in America and some of the more modern training programs, they invest in every age group, not just the children, because they believe that success can be achieved across all levels, right? So yeah, there's a bit of a misconception when it comes to support, that children are the only deserving group, right? But that's a myth. That's actually a myth, and
For sure.
an outdated philosophy.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, you see that across a lot of sports. But yeah, like I said, that support is paramount in wanting to achieve any level of success. So for anyone watching who wants to take
Yeah,
it pro, get some sponsors or something, get a
yeah,
scholarship or
fucking
something.
oath. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, for
that's right.
sure.
Don't
Um,
get burnt out. Yeah,
yeah, like a lot of people maybe have to work full time. They can't do it. I know Volk was a full time concreter and still managed to become UFC champ, but that's like an outlier.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's
Yeah,
right.
it's crazy.
Yeah,
Um, I want to talk a little bit about nutrition. But before I let you go, so
yeah, yeah.
what is your general? Talk to me about your general philosophy on nutrition, like for athletes, and yeah, like any mistakes people might be making, because you are very well versed in that topic as well.
Yeah, yeah. Nutrition. Gee, where do I start? Um, yeah, gee, I don't know where to start there, but for me, it's just, I mean, if you're someone who's training, well, let's focus on combat sport. That's a pretty demanding sport. You're training at high intensities, so carbohydrates are going to be very important to maintain your performance. So
Hmm.
carbohydrates are the foundation for any nutrition program for an athlete. And then obviously you layer on your fats and then your protein. Um, your protein requirements might change throughout a lot of people might know this, but protein might actually change throughout the year. So obviously if you're lifting a lot of weights, breaking down a lot of muscle, then you're going to probably need more protein. Maybe double your body weight or even more, depending on your level. Um, and then if you're not doing a lot of weights, you're doing a lot more skill work, or live work, your protein requirements will actually drop, and then you might need more carbohydrates to fuel those sessions. And that's
Hmm.
that's super important if you're trying to maintain weight, or trying to cut weight. You want to ensure that you're maximizing what you need and minimizing what you don't need, so that you can get the best out of yourself.
Yeah, I was watching a video of a famous bodybuilder. I think it was Dorian Yates or someone like that,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he was
yeah.
saying
Dorian
like,
Yates.
yeah, I think he was saying like, depending on whether he was cutting or bulking, he would modulate
Mm,
only his carbs, because like you need fat for your hormones, obviously, and you need protein for the muscle, because he's obviously doing a lot of
mm.
hypertrophy work. But he would modulate
Yeah,
carbs.
yeah,
So would you say it's kind of similar for a combat athlete, but I guess you're modulating protein as well, because you might not need as much when you're not um, like lifting as many weights? Or is
exactly,
that sort of what you're
exactly.
saying? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly right. So,
Yeah.
a bodybuilder would probably only need to modulate carbohydrates,
Hmm.
um, because they're always tearing muscle down. They're always lifting weights. Dorian Yates probably was taking a lot of gear, so he'd probably
Yeah.
have a lot of like protein turnover. So
Hmm.
tearing down a lot of muscle, building a shit ton as well. So you'd need a tremendous amount of protein to fuel that. Um, but that is generally, yeah. The approach you take. For the fighter might have to modulate their carbs and their protein, only because they're restricted
Hmm.
by weight cutting, maintaining a certain weight, right? So to be able to do that, because of that, you want to be, like I said earlier, maximizing what you don't and maximizing what you need and minimizing what you don't need.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I do. So my there's my best. So
What's
one sec.
going on there, bro? Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah, they were just going nuts. It's
they're
that time of
punching
the day
on.
where they
Yeah,
go off.
that's all
Um,
right.
yeah,
Um,
but yeah. So my protein requirements might change anywhere between 150 grams to 250 grams a day,
mm,
right?
yeah.
If I'm doing if I'm lifting 5 times a week, I'll probably hit up to 250. If I'm only lifting once a week, then I'll probably consume 150. And if I'm lifting once a week or twice a week and cutting weight, then I'll
Hmm.
probably have a bit of a balance.
And
So protein,
do you track
yeah.
everything like strictly, or do you kind of by this time you know what you need and how much to do of everything
No,
without
no.
tracking
Yeah, I'm tracking everything very
it?
strictly when I'm cutting weight and
Yeah,
maintaining.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but um, if I'm not cutting weight for a comp and I haven't got like a time frame,
Hmm.
then I won't track as much as I would. I would probably check in with myself every 3 weeks.
Hmm.
And again, look, I'm really consistent. I'm pretty boring, so not a lot changes throughout my diet and stuff. So
Hmm.
when I've tracked it once, I'm going to stick to the same thing,
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't have to keep checking in with myself.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also something I wanted to talk about with you is
Mm.
like in camp versus out of camp. So like obviously a lot of fighters, like you mentioned, they have to cut weight. Um, but I've always thought like when you're in camp, you're obviously training at higher intensities and you're also preparing for a fight. So you want
Mm.
to make sure your sleep is good and that you're getting enough food to like prevent injuries.
Yeah.
So a lot of fighters will be in a like heavy deficit when they're in
Yeah.
camp.
Yeah.
Whereas like my sort of thinking is that like wouldn't it be better if you're at maybe maintenance, a slight deficit? Like I heard Paddy Pimblett, a UFC fighter, talking the other day that he's like eating something like 1,800 calories a day in camp,
Mm.
which is crazy because he's
Yeah.
burning over 4,000.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to
That's
me that just seems like a recipe for disaster, like in terms of injuries and performance and stuff like that. So what's
yeah.
your thoughts on that? Do you think in camp deficit has to be necessary? Can you get the weight cut just from your water cut, or
Yeah.
like should you be on maintenance? What's your sort of thoughts on that in camp versus out of camp?
All right. Yeah. I look. Ideally speaking, you'd want everyone to be consistent, and like we were talking before, you have that all year round training. You want to have some degree of all year round nutrition as well, like
Hmm.
staying on track with that stuff. But for outliers like Paddy Pimblett, that's a really good point because uh, it's good you brought that up because there's actually a video of sports scientists that actually did a study on Paddy, right?
Mm.
And what they did was they let Paddy run his own weight cut first, right? And they tracked his blood markers and hormones and stuff like that. And they tracked how much weight he lost and how quickly and how much he regained, and how much muscle mass he lost. Then the next fight, they took charge. They ran his weight cut and they compared them, right?
Mm.
And they showed that the approach that Paddy, the extreme weight cut method that Paddy used, his test levels dropped. He lost a significant amount, well, probably not a significant amount, but he lost muscle mass and all that sort of thing. His strength dropped. Versus when the sports scientist stepped in and did the weight cut for him, a lot of that stuff was pretty much maintained.
Mm.
So you can find that on YouTube. I think if you put links and stuff in the description, I can send them to you.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
that's a really good watch because it actually
Mm.
compares the UFC fighter, because that's really common. Guys will do extreme weight cuts,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of my philosophy, I like to get um, I like to lose as much fat as possible in a sustainable way. Sometimes in an extreme way, like I'll
Mm-hmm.
do it in blocks. Like for the first 4 weeks, I might put them through a bit of hell and
Mm-hmm.
just say, look, it's going to be tough this next 4 weeks, but let's just get the fat off. Train hard, and then the next 8 weeks after that, we'll focus on prioritizing your performance, bring your carbs back up, and just make things a bit better, right?
Yeah.
Because I just don't want to get into the stress of, because if you take it too much of a gradual approach, especially if time is limited, you have limited time to make adjustments,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have to be very careful. So I'd rather take like an extreme approach at the beginning, and then sort of ease people. If I'm cutting too much, they're losing too much weight too quick, then I can make adjustments quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, yeah. There's a lot of ways you can do it. I've had guys who have come to me, 2 weeks out and said, "Hey, bro, I've got 8 kilos to cut." Those guys, I tell them, "Look, man, you're gonna feel like shit. It's gonna be fucked. You're not gonna feel good." I always preempt it with that. I don't say, "Oh yeah, yeah, sweet man, you're gonna feel amazing," blah blah blah. I don't try to sell them like this special program because it's just not possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, these are some things you can do to sort of help keep your performance a bit elevated to help sort of counteract these negative effects. But overall, you're going to feel like trash. And then
Mm.
that guy, he actually did it to me twice. He felt like shit on comp day, right? But I wasn't surprised. So because it was the same day weigh-in as well. You don't want to fuck around with the
Oh,
same day weigh-in too,
yeah.
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 Like you want to be on. Ideally, you want to be on the ball with that stuff. You want to make
Yeah.
sure you're on weight, or at least within maybe 2 to 3%, and then the rest of that weight you can actually cut pretty easily by using acute weight loss methods. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a few available. You mentioned one, dropping water. And you can do that by jumping in a sauna. You can do that by cutting your water down, reducing the amount of sodium in your diet, reducing your carbohydrates, and then you can also do water loading, which is pretty popular.
Yeah.
And then I think that I mentioned the sauna. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can do passive sweating, which is in the sauna, or you can do active sweating, where you're on the bike warming up with the sweatsuit on.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different methods to make those little cuts. And then there's other stuff where you can take some safe to use laxatives,
Mhm.
and all this stuff is tested before you actually use them in the week,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
want to make sure they work and it doesn't have any side effects. But yeah, you might take laxatives to empty your guts out.
Mm-hmm.
You might follow a diet that actually encourages bowel movements, and to clear out your intestines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah, cool, bro. And I mean, yeah, I think that um, weight cut is where a lot of people like try and push it to the limit as well. You know,
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
um, like with what you said, if someone's got like the way I just thought about it, just off the top of my head, was like if I've got someone who's doing a 10-week camp, for
Mm,
example, and they're at like 15% body fat, then maybe like get them down to like 10-12% as quickly as you can within
yes.
reason,
Yep.
and then the rest keep the calories at like maintenance or close to maintenance. And then once the acute weight loss phase is, that's obviously when you drop the rest of the weight. Is that something that I guess you'd sort of follow as well? Is that what, like, you know the
Yeah.
best way you think? Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll always sit down, take their weight, get their body fat percentage, and then I've got
Yeah.
like my own sort of spreadsheet where I calculate their body fat percentage and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I have like a schedule, like a daily schedule, and I
Yeah.
just sort of plan out the goals. So all the all the weight loss goals for that whole, let's say, 10-week period,
Mm-hmm.
right? And try to hit those goals each week.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I lay it out all on the table. There's a plan in place, and I've got all those numbers to go off.
Mm.
Yeah,
Cool.
definitely.
And so just one quick question as well that I've been
Yes.
thinking about
Yeah.
before we start to wrap up.
Yeah.
Um, so I've done a DEXA scan like not too long ago. I'm about the same weight as I was when I done the DEXA scan, and I was like 78 kilos of fat free mass
Yeah.
total. So does that mean that I could make like 77 kilos, or is that like impossible to make if my fat free mass is like 78? Like if I was going to say, for example, go pro and do that full weight cut.
Um, so fat free mass was 78, was it?
Yeah,
77.
yeah,
No, so what was your body fat percentage?
like 22 or something.
Yeah, if it's 20,
Yeah,
then you'd calculate, so let's say you were to go to, what was your weight, your actual weight?
like 100 or 99 point something. Yeah, like 100.
Yeah, so we'll say 100. Oh, that's an easy number to work with.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
minus 10%. So if you were to get down to 10% body fat, that would be 90 kilos, right?
yeah,
At 10% body fat.
yeah.
Then shave off another five. Um, what's that? That'll get you down.
Five
What?
percent or
Yeah,
5 kilos.
no,
Yeah, because
5%.
it's 100
Yeah.
percent anyway.
So if you
Yeah,
were to shave 15% body fat, yeah, you'd be
yeah,
down to 85 kilos, right?
yeah,
And now you've got a body fat percentage of 5%. That's pretty
yeah.
low.
That's
So
yeah.
yeah, so
I don't think I'm going there.
yeah. But
Yeah.
some guys do it.
Mm,
There are some scenarios where guys will actually lose muscle mass in order to make a, like you'll have guys who will follow it like a low protein diet,
mm.
to lose fat free mass in order
Oof.
to make weight for a class. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
guys do that. So they'll
Crazy.
follow a very specific training plan where there's not a lot of resistance exercise.
Mm,
So less resistance exercise and a low protein diet, to change your body composition. So it happens. It happens. Yeah.
that's a good problem to have, having to get smaller, get weaker. Fuck,
That,
I'm too big, I'm too strong. I gotta
that,
stop eating protein.
that. Man,
Yeah.
there's so many crazy scenarios, and
Yeah.
I hope I've also mentioned, like I've been talking a lot about sort of ideal circumstances, but there's always going to be outliers. Like
Mm,
there's a guy named Mikey Musumeci. He's a bit of a
mm.
king in the
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu world.
Yeah.
Like that guy does some crazy shit. I think he said he cut like he cut like a stupid amount of weight and totally dehydrated himself on purpose because he wanted to see if he can still perform in that state.
Yeah.
Right? Like he just wanted a challenge. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he was still able to perform at a super high level and win the competition in a completely dehydrated state and malnourished state. So it's pretty,
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty interesting what the human body is, or the
100%. And
mind.
those
The mind is
yeah, and
capable.
those are the type of things I think that you have to do and push yourself, like,
Yeah,
like you said with the book you mentioned, like actually training those difficult situations. A lot of people avoid that sort of thing, but experimenting with those scenarios is really, that's going to make you be able to perform when you're feeling like shit, like you mentioned before.
yeah.
um so yeah, I mean, I didn't hear that about Mikey, but it seems like definitely something he would do. It's
Oh yeah,
a bit
yeah,
on the spectrum.
yeah. Nuts,
Yeah.
nuts. Yeah.
um but yeah, we'll start to wrap up, bro. Is there anything else you want to touch on? Anything else you wanted to mention, in terms of uh, S&C or nutrition with the bird?
Yeah, he's going nuts.
You look like a
He wants
pirate now.
attention. Anything I wanted to mention? Yeah. Nah, man, I'm covered. I think yeah, I think that was good, man. We covered a lot of topics, and
Yeah,
I hope it helps. Um, yeah, I think the mental toughness stuff hopefully will help a lot of people. Just some of the stuff I've picked up from the
yeah,
VIS and all that sort of thing.
yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome, bro. Definitely helped me. I mean, I've learned a lot just in this past hour, and the other time we've spent together on the other podcast, and yeah, just always learning so much from you. So I appreciate you coming on, bro. Um,
man, loved it. Thanks for having me.
so just before I let you go, any final words for anyone listening? I know I'm putting you on the spot. We done it
No,
last
it's
time. I'm going to do it again.
yeah,
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 final words, philosophy is something that you want to leave anyone listening with.
yeah. Man, I'll just say, can't remember what I said last time, but first thing pops in my head is just find, if you feel uncomfortable, chase discomfort and make it comfortable. I'll probably say that.
Awesome.
So if there's, for example, like we were talking earlier, if you find sparring with new opponents difficult, keep sparring new opponents and seek the opportunities. Reframe it as an opportunity to practice sparring new people, for example, and you'll find that that will no longer be uncomfortable to you because now you know how to do it. So yeah, you
Awesome,
can
brother.
apply
That's
that.
perfect. That's
Yeah.
perfect, and something I'm going to implement myself for sure. So, thanks again, brother, for coming on.
No,
Um,
that's
Maybe
my
we'll do a
pleasure, man.
part 3 one day.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
appreciate it, brother. Thank you very much, and I'll be in
No
touch.
worries. Thanks, bro. Take care.
Thanks, bro.